Right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being so patient, but we are now at 7 o'clock. I'm Councillor Carol Jewell and I chair the Planning Committee. We have 9 elected borough councillors with a variety of professional officers. There's a formal set of procedures which must be adhered to. Firstly, the planning officer will present the application, and then only those speakers who are registered to speak will be invited to address the committee. There is a strict limit of 3 minutes per category of speaker, those being town and parish councils, objectors, supporters, and those borough councils affected by the application. After which the committee will discuss and debate an application and seek clarification from the council's professional planning officers in order to reach a decision. It is important to stress that you're here to observe but not... Sorry, I'll try and bring it a bit closer. It is important to stress that you are here to observe but not to participate. The decision reached by the committee may or may not agree with that recommended by the presenting case officer. It is important to understand that the committee can only determine the actual planning applications presented before it using current national and local planning policies and relevant decisions of the Planning Inspectorate. Finally, this is a hybrid meeting with committee members present in the room, while some officers are attending the meeting in person and some connected via Microsoft Teams. The meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube. Was that better? Did you hear me better at the back? I wonder if I can turn this up. I'll bring it even closer. How's that? I'll shout at you. Sorry, I've got a soft voice, so it doesn't help. Okay. We get on to the agenda then. First of all, I've got apologies. Have we any apologies? No apologies. And the other next item is minutes of the previous meeting. You've all read these, I presume, looking at the committee members. Yeah. Do you all agree with those minutes? Could I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay. I'll sign those at the end of the meeting. Next, item 20 is declaration of interest. Have we got any? No? Okay. Thank you very much. And item 21 is applications to be deferred and withdrawn items. Again, I don't think we've got any of those. Well, that was quick. Right. We then move on to application 222306, which is land adjacent to Blagrove Lane, Wokingham. First of all, I'd like to invite the officer to speak to the application, and then we'll ask those people coming who are here to comment to go take it from there. Thank you. Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Just bear with me just whilst I share my screen. This is an outline application for the erection of up to 350 dwellings and care home with new access onto Barkham Road and Blagrove Lane. Landscaping, on-site SANG, suitable alternative natural green space, following demolition of outbuildings and agricultural buildings. All matters other than access, i.e. appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, are reserved for determination at a later stage. Hence, is only the principle of whether 350 dwellings can be satisfactorily accommodated on site and the detailed two-dimensional design of the proposed vehicle access that can be considered tonight. The application site, outlined in red on the location plan here, is located within the countryside and sits between the southwestern edge of Wokingham, a major development location, and Barkham, a limited development location. The site is located either side of Blagrove Lane, east of Leslie Sears playing fields and Viking Field, north of Evans Lane and Doles Lane, and south of Barkham Road. The site is located within flood zone 1, where the risk of fluvial flooding is low. There is a gradual undulation in levels across the site. The application site consists of 31 hectares of undeveloped grazing land and woodland, the majority of which, approximately 26 hectares, is in permanent pasture use. These fields are lined by hedgerows, trees, ditches, and include a number of small-scale outbuildings and agricultural buildings to the south. There are no public rights of way within the application site. However, Doles Lane, beyond the western boundary, forms a byway open to all traffic, and there are public right of ways surrounding the site. Adjacent land in uses include Southern Electricity Substation to the northeast, which is surrounded by Bottle Copse local wildlife site, as identified in yellow on figure 2 on page 33 of your main agenda. Outside of the application site is an area of ancient and semi-natural woodland that wraps around the substation. The site contains a significant number of trees that are protected by tree preservation orders, including a woodland order adjacent to Barkham Road, which falls within the local wildlife site. There are existing residential properties along Blargrave Lane, Barkham Road and Doles Lane, the southern half of which is an unmade road. The proposed development's location would broadly align with the radial growth which has occurred along the town's key routes and would have a degree of functional connectivity with the town centre. Functional connectivity with the town. Services, railway station, not dissimilar to other peripheral parts of the town. The quantum of development is in keeping with the scale and density of surrounding housing development, notwithstanding that the site falls outside of settlement limits. The proposal would provide much needed market and affordable housing. A policy compliant 40% would be delivered should the council not choose to take up the care home land parcel. Affordable housing is a significant benefit that would boost the supply of new homes within the borough. A proposed new access would be provided onto Barkham Road, the design of which would straighten the road at this point to allow for adequate visibility displays. New accesses are also proposed along Blargrave Lane to the south, of which only pedestrian, cyclists and emergency vehicles will have access to. An additional access is proposed on the southern part of Blargrave Lane. The proposal would provide for the provision of on-site allotments or financial contribution in lieu, a functional SANG, in addition to public open space provision, which accords with all the council's open space typologies, and an employment skills plan or contribution in lieu to promote local employability skills. Financial contributions towards the council's My Journey scheme, new bus stops and a bus contribution towards Arborfield bus strategy to promote more sustainable means of travel to and from the site would also be secured by a Section 106 legal agreement. Further measures to promote walking and cycling strategy between the site, bus stops, schools, Wokingham Station, Molly Miller's Lane employment will be secured again by condition. The proposal would promote east-west permeability through the site to improve connections with Leslie Sears and Vikingfield areas of open space that lie directly east of the application site and the existing residential areas beyond. The development will be conditioned to deliver carbon reductions at 10% above current building regulations at the time of submission of reserved matters application or the future home standard in force at that time. The proposal would reduce harmful impacts by virtue of the partial loss of Bottle Copse local wildlife site to facilitate the proposed new access onto Barkham Road. However, it's been demonstrated that in the long term, this could adequately be compensated for and no overall loss of biodiversity would occur, subject to adherence to the recommended conditions and planning obligations. Similar, the removal of 147 trees resulting from the development would be mitigated by replacement tree planting over an area of just over 1 hectare within the proposed SANG. The proposal would result in a loss of 26 hectares of best and most versatile agricultural land. However, The viability of future agricultural production on the site has been seriously questioned, and considering the application site represents a very small proportion of the overall BMV resource within the borough, only limited weight to the environmental and economic harm arising from its loss, which would have to be balanced against social priorities of meeting identified housing needs. As mentioned, only the proposed new access and principle of development that is being considered under this application. However, the proposed building heights parameter plan has been provided here for consideration, which indicates broad limits of development forms, shown in blue and mauve. The proposed eastern parcel of the development will be limited to housing of 2 to 2.5 stories, whilst the western parcel would include housing of a similar height plus 3-story buildings at its core. The care home facility, if implemented, will be limited to a maximum height of 8.5 metres. Space to the west, in between Barkham Road, would form the proposed SANG. Proposed area of SANG, 18.6 hectares, considerably exceeds the area required to mitigate 350 houses. That would be 6.5 hectares. However, to deliver functional SANG and meet natural England criteria, an area closer to that shown here is required to be delivered and secured prior to first occupation of any dwelling as part of the proposal. The design of the proposed SANG includes a car park that means that SANG capacity over and above that required to satisfy 350 houses is available. This means that the facility would be able to provide future SANG capacity, and provisions and protocols for which are also recommended to be secured by planning obligation. In addition to the building heights parameter plan, the submitted design and access statement, along with other indicative plans, have provided a residential vision for the site based on perimeter blocks that have the potential to provide a high quality development that relates well to its surroundings and maximises the use of existing mature landscaping around the perimeter of the site. Officers have assessed the proposal in terms of traffic impacts, car parking provision, flooding, drainage, heritage, archaeological and residential amenity, and no adverse impacts have been identified that are not proposed to be appropriately mitigated for. No new loss of biodiversity would occur with the potential for.
Sorry, could I remind you not to interrupt? Just let the officer do his piece, please.
No net loss of biodiversity would occur with the potential for some future enhancement, although the required extensive tree planting to be secured may limit the extent of biodiversity gain. Conditions are recommended to secure full details of sustainable urban drainage measures prior to commencement of development, in addition to their maintenance. It is fully recognised that there would be a degree of harm associated with the loss of undeveloped land between settlements resulting from this development, but this is not considered severe and would be manageable due to the robust landscape mitigation efforts that are proposed. The Council's most important policies for determining the application are out of date by virtue of the absence of a NPPF compliant housing land supply. Paragraph 11D2 of the framework therefore states that permission should be granted unless any impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. When assessed against the policy as the framework taken as a whole, or there are specific policies in the framework to indicate that the development should be restricted. In this regard, the tilted balance is engaged, albeit tempered due to overpast housing delivery. Whilst it is recognised that there isn't adverse impacts of permitting this development, the benefits associated with the scheme in the short term would be equal to the negatives and marginally outweigh the adverse impacts in the long term. Hence, those adverse impacts identified when applying the tempered balance are not considered to be of such magnitude that officers believe they significantly, demonstrably outweigh the identified benefits associated with the proposal, as required by paragraph 11D of the NPPF. Therefore, in applying the presumption of favour of sustainable development, on balance, it is recommended that outline permission be granted, subject to conditions listed and the completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure the following: 35% affordable housing on site, transfer of a care home land parcel, or an additional 5% of affordable housing, sang to be delivered by the developer prior to first occupation of any dwelling, sang to be transferred to the council once completed, commuted sums for management and maintenance of the sang to be paid, monitoring payment also in respect of SAM payments, provisions and protocols for the sale of potential future SAM capacity to be agreed and secured. 8, biodiversity net gain, monitoring methods to be secured. 9, details of highways adoption or management company to maintain private roads. 10, my journey contribution. 11, bus contribution. 12, traffic regulation order for stopping at Blargrove Lane. Financial contributions towards bus stops. Replacement planting at Finch Hampstead Road, Evandens Lane. Employment skills plan, provision of on-site allotments or financial contribution in lieu. Open space to remain as open space, Section 106 monitoring contribution, and the informatives and conditions outlined in Appendix 1. Or refuse the application if the legal agreement is not completed within 9 months. In addition, Chair, there is a supplemental report before you, and that's provided to give clarification on a few points. Firstly, the local plan update. It provides clarification to reaffirm why only limited weight can be given to can be attributed to the Borough Council's emerging LPU at this time. In respect of Barrett badges, it provides further clarity from the Council's ecologist, reiterating that adequate mitigation measures that can be secured. In terms of conditions, there are some relatively minor changes to the wording of the recommended conditions. These include extending the timescale for submission of reserved matters, condition 1. Condition 2, access plans added to the approved plans condition. Condition 3, phasing condition amended to include SANG delivery and care home details. 5, material details now required prior to development above damp proof course. Condition 18, phasing approach added to secure offsite works. And condition 38, phasing approach to secure SANG. In addition, in terms of the supplemental, a small amendment to obligation 2 of the Section 106 obligations relating to the transfer of land in respect of the care home. Access plans, the Blargrove Lane Northern and Southern Access Plan, they're appended to that your report there, the supplemental. And finally, some late representations were received. A request from a resident to consider improved pedestrian and cycle links between Evandens School. The feasibility of various measures to improve links to the school would be considered under condition 19 for a walking and cycling strategy. And finally, we also had a further objection in relation to highway safety concerns regarding potential vehicle-cycle collisions on the southbound drivers approaching the proposed new vehicle access on Blargrove Lane. The proposed access off Blargrove Lane has been subject to a stage 1 safety audit, and the problems highlighted by this latest objection were not raised as part of that assessment. Improvements to visibility space will be delivered as part of the development, which would include a new bus stop and pedestrian crossing facilities as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Okay, we get to the part now where I ask the public speakers to come up to the microphone here. The first one I've got is Warren Dixon from the Town Council. Thanks, Warren.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Excellent. Right, so I'm Warren Dixon, representing Wokingham Town Council. As shown by the number of responses and attendance this evening, the town and local community are opposed to this development as it fails to meet the borough's standards, plans and strategies on all points. There is substantial use of the word mitigate throughout these reports. This location has not been selected for development in the existing local plan and does not feature in the new local plan. The supplementary agenda makes reference to a High Court judgment in West Oxfordshire. I would draw attention to the fact in this judgment, the relevant local plan had time expired. Wokingham has a valid plan until 2026, which is in line with the adoption timeline suggested for the local plan update. Therefore, this location should still be seen as strategically not suitable for development and an opportunistic application. It is a significant expansion from existing development and will result in reducing enjoyment of the countryside in contradiction to policy CP11. This development substantially reduces the settlement boundaries between Wokingham, Barkham and Finchampstead, leading to the loss of identity of each of these areas. This view is not only taken by Wokingham Town Council, but shared by the parish councils of both Finchampstead and Barkham, who have provided comments to this effect on the 12th and 20th of December, respectively. I would also like to draw the committee's attention to application 241556 on Ye Old Leathern Bottle, which is less than 500 metres to the northwest and forms part of the same green space between settlements. This application was rejected on the 14th of August, with the planning officer citing multiple prior planning decisions supporting this objection and, to quote, would cause harm to a key settlement gap between Wokingham and Barkham through the urbanisation of the site's open and rural setting, and would be detrimental to the site's valued landscape character and sense of place. This is contrary to section 12 of the MPPF, policy CP1 and CP3 of the core strategy development plan, policy CCO1 and CCO3 of the management development delivery document, and section 8 of the borough design guidance. All of these objections are valid for this application. The proposal would result in the loss of approximately 26 hectares of best and most versatile agricultural land. The current parcelling of this land is immaterial to its grade, and the retention of such is an ecologic, economic and national food security matter. The new access route required by the application leading to Barkham Road creates a large paved area and necessitates the removal of existing mature woodland. This access road is elevated from the surrounding land, making it more prominent and an eyesore in contradiction to policy CCO3. Both the new junction and expanded junction on Evidence Lane are substandard, will increase the risk of accidents and will reduce the viability of sustainable travel between Wokingham and its surrounding areas, leading to a negative effect on policy CP6. This has not been considered or modelled within the officer's points. It will also lead to an additional traffic on both the Barkham and Finchampstead roads that will degrade Wokingham Town's attractiveness as a destination in contradiction to policy CP30. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. I thought you were just about to finish, so that's all right. That's pretty good. Okay, the next one is resident Paul Tolan.
Okay, my name is Paul Tolan and I'm speaking on behalf of the Save Bladegrove campaign. There is huge resistance to this application from the people of Wokingham, as evidenced by over 1,000 objections. Last-minute clarifications and amendments to the application, discussed here, have been disclosed to you in the last 24 hours but kept secret from the public. This is an abuse of statutory guidance and opens up any decision made tonight to legal challenge. I will be writing to the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee to investigate this. The developer has offered some mitigations, but we're shocked that council officers say these mitigations are sufficient to offset the huge negatives described in the proposal. Some of the points I will raise, also raised by Warren, were seen by the council as reasons to reject the Limit Hill development, so it's baffling that operators have recommended approving a 6 times larger development on adjacent land. Given the council's declaration of an ecological emergency and a requirement for a 20% uplift in biodiversity net gain, the proposed gain of just 0.14% is a disgrace. Even more so when you realise the developers count new monoculture hedging as having the same biodiversity as very high value established hedgerow. So in reality, there will be a huge biodiversity loss. This is completely contrary to the Council's unanimously agreed decision to deliver biodiversity and environmental enhancements to the planning policy. With regard to sustainability, the developer's claim is completely false. It's dependent upon the number 3 bus being diverted through the site, but Reading Bus Company have refused to confirm that a diversion is even possible. So the sustainability element of the proposal is built on an entirely false premise. The officer's report fundamentally misdirects the committee on this point. The main road through the development runs within 10 metres of the entrance to a huge badger set. The suggested mitigations are a cruel joke. Everybody knows that the badgers will be dead before mitigations are put in place. The report states that this is a valid reason to refuse the application, but officers fear the legal costs of an appeal. Agreeing to kill these defenceless animals to save legal fees is absolutely not what the people of Wokingham want and expect from you as councillors. Finally, there are multiple road safety issues which have not been mitigated. Reading Bus Company has stated that the new junction on Barkham Road is not safe, as buses would have to swing into the opposite carriageway. The already dangerous Blagrove Lane, Roberts Grove Bend will become a death trap. The plan for an enlarged and dangerous junction on Evendon's Lane is right outside the entrance to Evendon School and hard up against a pedestrian crossing used by young children on a daily basis. Incredibly, the highways officer has dismissed these clearly documented safety issues, which were submitted to him as specific objections, and has not even put them before the committee. People will be killed or seriously injured by this proposal. You have a legal duty to protect the people of Wokingham, especially the children, so we urge you to reject this proposal.
Thank you very much. I think the microphone's on. Somebody else who can time their speech very well. Thank you very much. It does help. The next person is Elkie Russell, who is the agent for the applicant.
I'm not agent, I'm actually the developer, if that's okay. Members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to address you tonight. I'm Elkie Russell, I'm Managing Director at Berkeley Homes. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone who's engaged with us throughout the application process. The feedback we have received has been invaluable in creating the scheme that we're proud to bring before you this evening. Our vision for this proposal is to deliver a thriving new neighbourhood for 350 much needed, high quality family homes set within an enriched landscape. Our landscape-led approach will open up currently private and inaccessible land to the local community. We will provide more than 18 hectares of public open space, equivalent to 26 professional-sized football pitches. This new open space will include over 9 hectares of sang, community allotments, nature trails, woodland and informal play areas.
We already have all that.
Thank you. Working closely with the Council's ecologist, we have agreed a comprehensive package of ecological mitigation and enhancement measures, including underground badger tunnels, providing safe crossings under the proposed access road. Thank you.
Sorry, let's just conduct this, listen to the people that are speaking at the moment and let them speak, and then we can take it from there. It's only fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Our proposals will deliver 35% affordable homes, plus land for the council to deliver a 68-bed care home, helping to meet the future adult social care needs of the borough. If the council decides not to pursue a care home in this location, the additional land will be used to increase affordable housing to 40% across the site. 70% of the affordable dwellings will be of social and affordable rented tenure, and we will build 8 cluster flats to assist those in need of supported living. The homes we build respond to the climate emergency. They'll be thermally efficient, using low carbon and renewable technologies, including air source heat pumps. A package of approximately £16 million of infrastructure investment will be made into the local area through SIL and Section 106 contributions for improvements to local healthcare, schools and highways. The site is in a sustainable location for new homes within easy reach of local shops and services. The proposals will deliver highway improvements to the Everdens Lanes, Finchampton Road Junction, 4 new bus stops, pedestrian cycle improvements to Barkham and Blagrove Lane. A contribution is also proposed to increase the frequency of the existing local bus service on Barkham Road with a diversion through the site. Development, when done well, can be a force for good. This scheme delivers high-quality new homes, new affordable homes, a potential care home site for the council, new public open spaces, highways improvements, and huge infrastructure investment of £16 million for the borough in Sill and Section 106. In closing, we hope members feel able to support your officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elkie. Moving on then, the fourth person is Adrian Mather, who's the ward member. Adrian, I understand that you're sharing your time with Joseph, and the other ward member.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Dear committee members, I would like to draw your attention to the following points. The local plan is not at an early stage, as stated in the documentation, but rather has been worked on for years and is now available. This plan does not include this site for development. The local plan will show a 5-year land supply. Therefore, the tilted balance, which is mentioned by the officers, is not relevant. And this should be either rejected or deferred at the very least. All previous applications on this site have failed due to many planning issues. The other speakers have mentioned some of these. This is not an optimal site. The roads in question are predominantly country lanes with limited width and compromised two-way traffic. There was an assumption by the officers that access through Viking Field and Leslie Sears Field has been agreed. These fields are owned by the town council, and I'm sure that access has not been agreed with the town council. This is another erroneous piece of information. Since this is not an optimal site, there are many mitigations. Let's be clear, mitigations are not clear-cut items, but rather long-term deliverables which depend upon the finance and goodwill of the developers. Experience of WBC...
And that's your 1.5 minutes, so either stop or hurry up, please.
Just one more point.
Thank you.
This site is too small to deliver the required infrastructure. The local plan will advocate strategic development locations. This is not an SDL. It won't provide a primary school or a high school.
Thank you. I was worried you were eating into Joseph's time, but I'm sure he can speak even quicker. So, Joseph, who's the other ward member, yeah. You can shout to me later.
Evening, everyone. To be blunt, this application is a clear case of unsustainable development. Now, the report admits its location is poorly situated for accessing existing facilities and services, ones that are already struggling to keep up with existing demand. This forces hundreds of more cars onto an already congested Barkham Road, where the main route into Wokingham crosses the level crossing at the station, whose closure throughout the day only enhances the increase in congestion. The swept path assessments conclude that numerous road locations will require widening. This will cause detriment to an already unsuitable level of walkability as more space is allocated to vehicles. Though it surprises me that despite acknowledging the surrounding roads not suitable to meet the demands of this site, there are no plans to improve any of the said roads, many of which are in a poor condition. Now, the benefits of this scheme are vastly overstated too. The report admits there are no unique economic benefits, but due to its size, its impact compared to other sites is considered positive. But there are much larger sites being considered for the local plan update. Therefore, its economic impact should not be considered on balance at all. In short, this application violates numerous core strategy policies and MDD local plan policies. It overstates the benefits and understates the drawbacks. Reality is that the adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And therefore, I ask that you refuse permission to this application tonight. Yeah.
Joseph, that was impressive. You spoke very quickly and you had 10 seconds to spare, so well done. Okay, right, so that's us back into committee. And has anybody got any points they want to raise, committee members? I think there's a few questions probably of the officers, but we'll take it as we go. So Michelle and then Martine.
Due to the over delivery of sites in the recent past, I believe that we don't have a 5-year land supply. And if we don't have a 5-year land supply, the tilted balance does apply. So if the applicant would go to the inspectorate would probably approve it, and they could strip out any benefits we actually get from this. I'd like to talk about this. I'd like to hear your opinion of the tilted balance and how this affects this site.
Thanks, Rochelle. Martine?
Oh, I have. Okay. Well, my comments anyway. As we all know, the council has not been able to demonstrate a 5-year land supply since February 2022. This means that under the policies of the National Planning Policy Framework, that the so-called tilted balance operates. In other words, there's a presumption in favor of sustainable development. As Rochelle mentioned, in our case, there's a good reason for the 5-year land supply no longer being available. Development in the early stages of the current local plan period was much more rapidly delivered than has been anticipated. Planning inspectors have recognized this at appeals and have therefore tempered the operation of the tilted balance when considering appeals in Wokingham Borough. The tilted balance also offers an important exemption to the presumption in favor of the development. Paragraph 11D2 of the National Planning Policy Framework states that the application can be refused permission if the harms clearly outweigh the benefits. And I personally believe that in this case, the harms do outweigh the benefits. Oh. The main area of application for the house is outside the development limits and within the open countryside. CP11 of the core strategy states that in order to protect the separate identity of settlements and maintain the quality of the environment, proposals outside of the development limits will not normally be permitted. So this application is in conflict with policy CP11. And indeed, section 104 on page 54 mentions 2 dismissed appeal decisions which have involved residential developments between Wokingham and Barkham. The inspector stated that the developments would be detrimental to the visual distinction and separation between the 2 settlements and highlighted the importance to retain the remaining gap to avoid the 2 settlements coalescing. The current proposal of 350 houses and a care is a significant greater scale and has a much larger impact on the integrity of the gap compared to the smaller scale schemes that were dismissed at appeal. Bottle Copse Wood is a local wildlife site. It's designated as a natural ancient woodland. We need to assess the proposal. We need to assess whether the proposal could avoid harm to the local wildlife site, and if so, whether the need for development outweighs harm to a site of a county importance. The road through the local wildlife site will cause fragmentation of the ancient woodlands, with the road acting as either a barrier or introducing an increased risk of animal mortality. The proposal would require the removal of 147 individual trees to facilitate the development. It would introduce artificial lighting. It would otherwise be a dark habitat. It will turn the area alongside the road into a scrubland, permanently changing the habitat. The ancient woodland would become a sang, a suitable alternative natural green space. But as I said, on page 59 and 83, it's mentioned that the design of the stand includes a car park. I understand that there is no conflict with the MDG local plan policy CC03, but we are replacing 147 individual trees in an ancient woodland site that is inaccessible and hence has a thriving wildlife, with 147 trees in a semi-manicured park open to the public. At the location visit on Friday, I saw deer grazing in the fields. I understand that the biodiversity impact assessment calculator calculates a zero net biodiversity, but we're putting wildlife at risk that are rare in Wokingham and biodiversifying it with standard public park wildlife that are common with Wokingham, such as ducks, swans, and pigeons. The National Planning Policy Framework states that the application can be refused permission if it harms clearly outweigh the benefits, even when the tempered tilted balance is in operation. And I do believe that in this case, the harms do indeed outweigh the benefits. The principal benefit, according to the National Planning Policy, is the provision of new housing. The principal harm, it seems to me, is the conflict with the policies in the existing local plan, particular policy CP 1111, as it will link the settlements of Wokingham and Barkham together. It's also in conflict with the intentions of the emerging new local plan, and the new proposed access road into the site through the local Weldout site will cause material harm and erode the undeveloped nature of Bottle Courts woodland. So on these grounds, I personally think we could refuse the proposal application. Thanks. But I'm keen to hear the...
Indeed. Thanks, Martijn. Yes. Are there any other questions or comments from the rest of the committee, please? Yes, Wayne.
To say we've been here before is an understatement. And the point you make about under delivery, all the sites that we've approved at this very committee in the last 2 years, how many of those counted in the 5-year land supply? I think the answer is probably 0. So I think we need to take a lot of consideration. I mean, I understand what you say, Martin. I get that. I think the fundamentals of the 5-year land supply, you know my points, I've made it lots of times previously. We do have a local plan, which ends in 2026, as Adrian said, but it's the fundamentals of this site. It wasn't chosen as a site in the local plan. The only reason we're discussing this evening is because the 5-year land supply. You could say we haven't got a local plan, but then how many authorities in this country have a valid local plan? Very few. And that's been identified in the latest shenanigans that are going on with the numbers that are going to be coming Wokingham's way if Labour have their way. So I think there's some points I want to raise. That's the fundamentals of the scheme, but there's a lot of things that have been said, and we need to address some of the points that were made by the speakers. Can we go back to the point that Adrian made about the access? I don't know these particular fields that was mentioned, but they were saying that it was something to do with the town council and there's no access being given. Can somebody identify where these access points are? Does that make sense, Andrew? Do you know where they are?
This is in respect of going through to the fields to the east, is it? Viking Field and Leslie Sears. Yeah, no, they've not been identified as such, and that would be dealt with in terms of at the reserve matter stage when we're looking at layout of the development. So no, that's not been assessed at that stage.
Okay, so potentially there could be no access onto those sites, potentially.
Well, the scheme directly abuts the open space area, so, and I think there is...
it's a public open space, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So the next one is my favourite topic. Here we go, Gordon. When we visited the site on Friday, the access point isn't ideal. The best, if development was going to take place on that site, the best site is further down. But on that bend, it looks just standing there, and I'm not a highways professional, just doesn't look right. Equally, the other point that's been mentioned, and some of the emails that we've received over the last few days. So most, I say most, let's just say roughly 50-50 of the traffic is going to exit via Barkham Ride, and another 50% roughly by by Blackgrove Lane, and a very, very small amount at the bottom section on the east package, which would then go into Evandens Lane. That's correct. So people could still, if they wanted to, and I'm referring to Roberts Field, I think, Roberts Field, they could potentially go back into the new development, follow the new development around, come out at the other end and go off to Evandens Lane and then back off to the Finchampstead Road. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's Roberts Grove.
Roberts Grove.
Yeah.
Sorry. So they would sort of meander all the way around and come out, whereas now they would take a left and then exit through the narrow road and then off they would go, whereas they would have to go to the other road.
Sorry, can I just stop you talking there? And we've still got Wayne speaking. Carry on, Wayne. Thank you.
Okay, so that's clear, isn't it? So most of the traffic is going to in the two main exits.
That is correct. That is correct.
Right. Okay. So the other question is,
I'm going to have to ask you to leave the room if there is continued disruption. Let's hear somebody speaking and then take it from there, please.
So the application 241556 on the map that we were presented with on Friday, Andrew, is that the site at the rear of the pub? Yeah, Limhill, is that? And how many houses was that for? Just out of interest, because they say it 6 times or something.
$60.
60. Okay. Then, are you satisfied with the no objection from the ecology officer, but he does go on with conditions? Are you satisfied that they can be overcome? Because if you read in page 19, he refers to demonstrated not less by the biodiversity net gain. Are we confident that we can achieve that in order to make this scheme work?
You're referring to our ecologist
Yes.
view of this application?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, we are, yeah.
And same with the landscapes?
Yeah,
landscape?
I think as I've outlined, this application was submitted prior to biodiversity net gain, the 10% being mandatory. So all the applicant is required to demonstrate is that there'll be no net loss on this site in terms of biodiversity. So they've demonstrated that as part of the biodiversity net gain metric, which is the professional kind of spreadsheet that's submitted to demonstrate that. And our ecologist has assessed that. Our ecologist has highlighted that there would have been further benefit to gain more biodiversity net gain, but because of the amount of trees that need to be replaced over that hectare, that's unlikely to really raise that biodiversity gain as such. Merely just putting trees in doesn't necessarily result in a biodiversity net gain as such. But we are confident that there'll be no net loss, which is what the applicant is required to demonstrate.
But in an ideal world, this site wouldn't be chosen because of the impact on that wildlife site, the amount of trees that are going to be taken down, etc., etc., etc. We're only here tonight being put in this position because of the lack of a 5-year land supply. But what difference will it make?
Thank you very much, Wayne. I think you summed that up at the end nicely. Any other committee member wanted to speak or wanted to ask the officer something? Yes, Moses.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at statement number 163 about the not access on the Blackgrove Road. I'm struggling to understand how that connection would be safe.
And I ask Gordon, could you help us on that one, please?
That's part of any planning application that has a highway new access. They have to go through a road safety audit, an independent road safety audit that identifies visibility displays, turning, potential safety impacts, and the designer has to provide satisfactory comments in response to the items raised by the safety auditor. The designer responded to each of the comments in detail and resulted that in the view it was safe. I must add to this that any new access will then go, if approved, will then go through a further design process, which has another 4 road safety audits through the process as the design goes, feeding back into the design and things like that, right until point of opening, and then period of time after. I can't remember what the period is, but the period of time after opening. So this is only the first stage of the safety audit. We have secured by condition the detailed design. Remember, this is the principle of the access. The detailed design will come if this application gets approved and goes through the technical acceptance process with our highways agreement team.
Thank you, Gordon. Moses, does that help you? Does that answer help you?
It does and it doesn't. Because if we are considering access at this stage, shouldn't we be satisfied that an access will work rather than pushing it down the road?
Sorry, we're not pushing it down the road. We have to make sure if with the outline application with access, we have to make sure A, it's designed appropriately, B, that the turning movers get in, C, they have the visibility displays to match the speed of that road, and B, they have to do a safety audit. At the end of that process, and this was a long drawn out process to get to where we were, the idea is in principle, the access at that location, the way it's designed, because the visibility displays have improved, they're not what's there now, that we can satisfy that we can accept this access in principle.
Okay, thank you. Moses, do you want to come back?
Yes, I have another question on sustainability. Looking at statement number 14 here, it says, I'm just reading in part, they provide easy access to existing facilities and or services. And I look at that in conjunction with figure 14. The development looks very far away from a lot of facilities and services. So how is that sustainable?
Yes, I mean, I think it's highlighted within the report. This is not the most optimal site in terms of cycling and walking distances, but also it's not by far the worst either. I think we're about seven minutes by cycle to the town centre. Yeah, there are a range of kind of measures and conditions and obligations to improve the sustainability of the site as well. So on balance, that really doesn't identify that there is significant concern in terms of it not being a sustainable site.
Thanks very much, Andy. I see a hand, before I come back to you, Moses, I see a hand at the back. I'm sorry, as I explained right at the beginning, there's no participation, but I'm sorry about that. Moses, you've got one more thing to say?
Yes, I just want to look at statement number 158. It is proposed that bus route 3 will be diverted from Backham Road, travel through the site, and route back to Backham Road. How does that work? Statement 158.
And did you need that repeated, or is that clear?
Want me to repeat it?
That's fine. Yeah. Paragraph 158. Bus route through would be diverted through the site, and in addition to that, we've agreed contributions towards the Arborfield bus strategy as well.
How does it come back to Backham Road? I can see it diverted to the side. I don't see how it comes back to Backham Road.
Sorry, say again.
I don't see how it goes back to Backham Road. I think it goes to Black Grove Road.
The bus route that was proposed would come off Barkham Road, run down the main new road, through the site, up into Blairgrove, and back into Barkham Road.
Okay, thank you. Yes, right. So, right, Brian, yes. Oh, Moses, are you okay with that answer?
I am, but that is not the way I would, because what I'm saying is it doesn't go back to Backham Road. It goes back to Black Grove and then back to Backham Road.
Back to Barkham, yeah. Yes. Okay, thank you. I had some questions of the officers, but Brian, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just returning to Wayne's point earlier about ecology, the local wildlife site, and biodiversity net gain. We've got Duncan Fisher is on the call, who's the council's ecologist, and it may be useful if Duncan just jumps in at this point before anything goes any further, and we provide a bit of context on those matters, if that's all right, Duncan. Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to clarify regarding the biodiversity net gain metric. The way that the metric works is it does add a modifier to, depending on the type of habitat that's proposed to be created and the potential time to create that mature habitat. And so what that does is it means that you, in a post-development scenario, end up with fewer units when you are creating the same edland as compared to grassland. So within the open space that woodland and grassland creation and enhancement is being proposed, it would be possible for a greater number of units to be created in the post-development scenario, and a higher biodiversity net gain outcome to be delivered through creation and enhancement of grassland rather than woodland. But what we recognised when we were looking at the proposal is that the loss of woodland within the local wildlife site was something that needed a greater amount of woodland compensation than is required just to satisfy the metric. Our view was that it was more important to create a greater quantum of woodland within the green infrastructure, and indeed help link the woodland in the north of the site towards the woodland towards the south and further beyond the site. And so what we tried to seek within the design of the green infrastructure was a greater quantum of woodland, which necessarily created a lower host development unit calculation within the metric. We still wanted to generate achieve that no net loss, but there was a balancing act between generating mitigation and compensation for woodland loss and trying to achieve an overall position of no net loss. And it's my view that the greater quantum of woodland would be beneficial compared to generating a higher biodiversity net gain score within the post-development scenario. One more thing I will add about the post-development scenario is at this outline stage, it's an assessment of whether a position of no net loss is achievable. And it would be at reserve matters that we would require it to again demonstrate that, but there may well be the opportunity to deliver a greater quantum of biodiversity net gain units within the post-development scenario when the full resolution of the detail at reserve matters comes forward. And that's something that we are finding with planning applications where we are using the metric at the moment. The reserve matters gives us actually allows a greater detail of the post-development scenario that conservatively is not included when first considered at outline.
Thank you very much. That was really helpful. Yes, did you want to come back?
Yeah, just to bring up a bit more background on the bus diversion route. The bus diversion route was proposed by the developer. Myself and the borough bus officer requested full details of the costings and the benefits of such a diversion and possible loss of people who couldn't use it on Barkham Road. We never received that. We kept receiving the Reading buses, oh yeah, we're in favour of it. Then Reading buses says, oh, we'll have to do a route audit. The information.
Can we let him finish?
What I was given, right, at the time was they were, I'm going back to 2022, they weren't against it. And then the next we heard, oh, we'd have to do a route survey before we go any further. Therefore, instead of the bus diversion route, I've gone for the £914 index linked per house to improve the existing bus route 3 on Barkham Road as part of the Arborfield development bus strategy. Because, you know, I'm a firm believer, and the inspectors have backed me up in appeals, that if another development benefits from something, for like a bus from another development, they should pay for it. And therefore, for clarification, I'm seeking the contribution to improve the existing bus service instead of diverting the bus route.
Thank you very much. I got that. Did you get that?
Yeah. So what we're saying then, in brief, the bus service that is already in existence on the Barkham Road will stay, but the new bus service, if they do agree to do it, won't go into the estate. It will just continue. It will be an improved bus service on the Barkham Road.
That is correct.
Right. So then that makes this even worse, because we've already said about the sustainability of this site, and if you look at the plan, the bus, I would imagine, I don't know where the bus stop is on the Barkham Road, but let's just say they put a new one in at that entrance, that 3-lane entrance, because there's going to be a middle section, isn't there? So somewhere up there, somebody's going to have to walk all the way down this lane, all the way down to where the development starts, here, and then the East Package. Is that right? Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. Good.
And then, sorry, as you're thinking about that, could I just ask a network question? Because I do like the point you make around making each development pay. But the one thing, and I haven't seen it, but I believe it's been published this evening, the new draft local plan that's going to full council next week. Is Barkham Square in there? And if Barkham Square is in there, has that been taken on the network? Because Barkham Square is only a few hundred metres down the road.
I haven't seen this. the document as
Is
yet.
it in there? Right. So that really does, because that would be for 500 or 600. How many is it for? But it's not far. So if you think about it, on this site, you've got 350. You turn out of this site, go left, go down towards the Bullock Barkham, just next on the left there. That could be another 600-700 houses in there. This network then becomes very congested. Well, it is congested now, quite right. But it becomes even more, doesn't it? And one of the reasons that I understand that we want to go forward with this local plan is because all the work that's been done over the last few years, and I know because I was involved in it, and all the work that's been done on the network, and we don't want to start again, although we might have to because of the numbers that may be imposed by us, or imposed on us. But I would have thought that we would have needed to take that into account, knowing that's coming down the track.
When we're looking at, and this is the rules nationally, when we're looking at the impacts on highways, the only thing we can take on board are committed schemes. However, if you work your way forward a couple of years and the local plan is the local plan, then we can take account of it because it's actually an agreed, it's in the local plan. But because it's not a committed scheme and it's not in the current local plan, it can't be taken account of. That's that's the guidance when we're looking at transport assessments.
I do get that, but I'm going to dwell on this point. We've got sites all over this borough that have been approved at this committee that cannot be taken into account because in terms of when you go to the inspector, you can't just say we've agreed with 187 at Bridge Farm in Twyford. Prove it. We've agreed for 1850 south of Wokingham. It's not far from here. Everdens Lane, Finchampstead Road, down to the bridge. That's all got to be upgraded to take into account the 1800, but we can't include those numbers.
Well, yeah, on housing numbers. However, when we're looking at the modelling that was used, the Burrs model, which includes the current local plan development plus the current local plan infrastructure. So what was in the local plan, the current local plan development, that's been included. If we move forward 2 years or whatever, the new local plan, what's in the model will include everything that's in the local plan model. In the local plan, that's how we look at it. But because we're in that, I'm not a local plan expert, but because we're in that crossover phase, what's included in the strategic model is the current local plan. That's what the assessment's done against in highway terms.
Thank you. Could we move on? I just wanted to, there was quite a few points raised, well, a lot of points raised by the people here, residents and local members. And I just wondered if I could get some comment from either Andy or Brian about the 5-year land supply, because that keeps coming up, just to clarify that. And also the policy CP11 about the gap, in which I think there was an appeal decision that went against because of that gap. So I don't know who'd like to take that, please.
Yeah, but the position is we don't have a 5-year land supply. I think we're at 3.2 years at the moment, so we're significantly below that. Tilted balance is engaged, and unless we can demonstrate that the scheme significantly, demonstrably outweighs the benefits in terms of its harm, that's the position we're in. Was there something more specific in terms of our 5-year supply?
I don't know. No, I think it was, we'd keep talking about the 5-year supply, and I just wanted to have it fairly, clearly stated that what is fact is that we haven't got a 5-year land supply, and we won't
Correct.
have until we've got that new local plan coming through. The other one was the query about the CP11, policy CP11 and the gap.
Sorry, the gap in terms of
Settlement gap, sorry.
settlement gap. Okay. I think my report highlights the issue in terms of potential that potential settlement gap and potential coalescence between Wokingham and Barkham. And my view in terms of this application is that because the SANG is proposed to the northern part of the application site, a significant area of 19 hectares, the majority of that separation would be retained. Really, the road that goes through is meanders, so you wouldn't have a clear line of sight through that area to the housing beyond. Now, obviously, the character would change. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean that the character doesn't change. But that additional kind of tree planting and screening mitigates that point. And moreover, the fact that it's proposed to be SANG, that's going to be retained in perpetuity as well as a SANG. So in that essence, you are kind of protecting that gap from further erosion. Albeit, I do appreciate you are putting in 350 houses on open fields to the further south. So I think that's outlined in my report in terms of coalescence. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think it's clear in the report. I just wanted to confirm that because we keep getting those points raised. Yes, Stuart.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to ask one quick question. It's kind of been sort of bugging me, actually, listening to all these arguments back and forth. I think the development beside the leather bottle was called Limon Hill. Was it something like that? A name like that? For 60 houses. And that was turned down because it wouldn't fit in the environment. Why is that no good and this is okay?
Thank you, Stuart. I'll jump in on the Limmerhill point. The Limmerhill, you've already covered this a little bit earlier. The Limmerhill development was for 60 houses. It was the north side of Barkham Road. The visibility of that site, the composition, the design, the visual impact of that site is assessed on its own. It's not assessed in comparison to any other sites, and neither can we assess this site based on the conclusions of another. Now, there are, as you know, and as people have mentioned, there's about 4 or 5 different recent appeals in kind of recent memory in the vicinity of the gap between Barkham and Wokingham. They're all very different. Some of them are quite small developments, others a bit larger. They all have different conclusions, and they've all been assessed at different times in the last few years where the policy environment, the tilted balance, the 5-year housing land supply may or may not be at play. There may be greater sensitivities over a site's location in terms of whether it can be perceived visually walking down a footpath. It's whether it's crossed by a public right of way, whether it's behind the pub on the Barkham Road, and whether it can be seen through and will affect the setting of other buildings. Each site is assessed on its own merits. The coalescence discussion and the 2 settlements, which are obviously of high priority within the current local plan in terms of maintaining their distinct identities, there are certain places, as you will see if you look on a map, where there is a pinch point. There is very narrow single fields remaining between these 2 settlements, and therefore even developments of, say, 60, 50 houses may have a greater magnitude of harm on the perceived coalescence than, say, a number of 100 houses, which may be in a different part of that gap. Other things like woodland, the local wildlife site, the access to each of these sites creates a degree of harm or otherwise could be mitigated. So I would just urge members of the committee, whilst there is, as we will find out if the debate continues tonight, there is lots of lessons to be learned from other sites and the rationale and conclusions we arrive at, especially at Peel, having recently had decisions at Trowse Lane, Watmore Lane. Not every site is the same, but likewise, we do need to be mindful that that making direct comparisons and using one to justify or one to resist another is not advisable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Yes, Sam.
Thank you. And I think I've heard some really good points from residents and some of the councillors here as well. I think my concerns are around CP11. I think that is, I don't feel like it's in line with that. My other concern is it possibly detrimental to the urbanisation of the local countryside and a sort of conflation between Barkham and the surrounding areas. But I'm keen to get the officers' insight into really a couple of things. Well, if this was rejected today, what's their sort of professional opinion on if this were to go to the planning inspectorate, and it went to appeal? Do they think it would go through at that stage? My concern would be if we did reject it, would we lose out? I'm just thinking about sort of at that point we'd get no community investment, there'd be no seal money, and that there could be a big loss to the community there. And also on the positives, I see 120 up to 123 units of affordable housing, and just thinking about the pressures in this borough of the demand for affordable housing is very high. So saying no to that, returning away potentially families who may need this affordable housing as well.
Thank you, Sam. Before I get the officer to answer that question, Greg, you had a comment to make.
Yes, Chair. I just have some questions around the highways points. I'd be very grateful if highways officers can, on page 14, it makes reference to, on point 12, to a traffic regulation order for stopping up Flower Grove Lane. I'd like some clarification of what that is, firstly. Secondly, after the site visit that I attended, I did get a sense that the second part of the site visit, to the south of the site, there was an immediate change. You could see in the roads they're much smaller. One of the concerns, having listened to everybody, is that that southern end is going to suddenly be swamped by road traffic. On page 16, on the second paragraph, I quote, it says the proposal would be acceptable in terms of its potential traffic impacts. Can I ask officers just to reassure me that this southern end of that site with those small narrow roads isn't going to be suddenly, swamped and congested with traffic?
Thank you, Greg. So the first question was about Sam asked was could it be refused? What would be the chances? What would happen if it was refused, in your opinion?
We can't really be drawn on that. We're here to provide a recommendation on the application rather than give a view in terms of what might or might not happen at appeal, I'm afraid. We've outlined what aspects of the proposal we think are outright acceptable and what aspects of the proposal require mitigation. And we've given an overall balance, so we can't really be drawn on that. Can we, Brian?
No, you're right. We can't speculate. But again, I'd bring members' attention to the inspector's conclusions of other recent major development sites that have been allowed in the borough, namely Watmore Lane on the edge of the major development location of Winnish, and Trowse Lane, which one was for, they're both considerable major developments and they were both allowed. And there are a number of similar issues which would come up at any appeal over, firstly, the weight given the tilted balance and how tempered it is in terms of our past over delivery. Accessibility, sustainability are all issues which you could argue sites like Trowse Lane and Watmore Lane may have been located in less sustainable locations than this, and members will be able to come to their own conclusions of how well or how poorly this site stitches in and connects to existing employment, train stations, bus stops, supermarkets nearby, and schools. Members will also be able to come to their own conclusions about the level of permeability created by two accesses and a site which currently benefits from no public rights of way crossing it, and how developments like Watmore Lane were viewed by the planning inspector as having second accesses. Returning to the Viking Fields and the possibility of connectivity and permeability through, wording used in the Watmore Lane appeal was there was nothing of substance to suggest there is no prospect at all of an access being created. The park, Viking Fields, is in public ownership, and whether agreement is reached now, as similarly with other appeal sites, there is nothing before us to say that there is no chance that it wouldn't happen. So members, there are many similar issues which will affect this site at appeal, and Councillor Ackdyer, it's a good question, because they're the sort of things we need to think about if the council, the committee members, are thinking of that as an option.
Thank you very much. I didn't expect you to have a crystal ball, but I knew you come up with some ideas. There was a question on highways about stopping up and the effect of traffic on the southern end.
Right. You quite rightly say on page 14, item 12, traffic regulation order for stopping up Blagrove Lane. When you look at the access plan, there's a section of Blagrove Lane that'll be stopped up to vehicular traffic. You need a stopping up order for that to stop vehicle traffic. It'll be open for walking, cycling. There'll be bollards there that can be removed for emergency vehicles to use. That's what the stopping up order would have to, it stops up for vehicular traffic. So there's a section of Blagrove Lane just south of Roberts Grove where it starts to narrow. So there'll be a section there that will stop vehicles going north to south. There is proposed a small access junction to allow access to the remaining part of Blagrove Lane to the south. The way that Blagrove Lane has been designed, that part, there'll be a lot more, there's more measures to reduce the speed for this walking and cycling route. So that, the view of reviewing the transport assessment, it's unlikely that a lot of traffic will go down that route.
Thank you.
Based on the national guidance for looking at transport assessments and everything else, and looking at the level of traffic that's on Barkham Road, you're looking about an average weekday, 24-hour, you're looking about 10, 11,000 vehicles. The peak hour is about 1,000 vehicles. A normal impact that we look at is that normally if there's a 10%, the daily variation is normally about 10%. And if the impact of traffic on that road is within that daily variation, the conclusion we can come to is there is no impact on traffic. Based on national guidance for carrying out transport assessments, which is right across the country.
Can I just say, this is a professional officer who's done many years on highways, very complicated subject that half of us would not understand. He's looked into it, he's coming up with his recommendations. Please just listen to him. Thank you. Have you finished, Gordon? Okay. Right. Any other members of the committee want to speak? I saw Andy and then Moses.
Okay. I want to make some comment and I agree with many of the comments tonight and including on traffic and road safety. This is very important. And this application is outside the local development plan and it's outside development location. And this application even include local wildlife site, and this will affect valuable trees and any replant and will not be the same again. And we must take local development plan seriously. If unplanned area, including local wildlife site, can carry out such large-scale construction project, who will take local plan seriously? Who will, yeah. And who will think we take the local environment and its residents seriously? And I think we must reject the plan. Thank you.
Moses.
Yeah, I want to go back to the issue of the bus route. If we now know that the bus is not going into the development, does that mean that the modeling that was done as stated on page 62 for site access to Backham is now invalid?
The level of buses, maybe 1 or 2 an hour, would not have an impact on the junction operation.
The question I'm asking is, you said you've done modeling, which assumed bus would go into the new development. Now you are saying the buses are no longer going to go into the place. My question is the modeling that we are looking at, is it still valid or it's not invalid?
It's not invalid. It's still accurate because the level of buses using the junction, a small level compared to as I said, the traffic on Barkham Road, for instance, it would not affect the modelling.
Thank you.
Okay. The final question on that then is, if the bus will no longer go into the development, why do we need that road to be that big?
As I see it, it's a standard size. I don't think it's modelled for buses, but I'll take advice on that.
Not a highways engineer, but I'm understanding it is the standard size to accommodate two-way vehicles.
Right. Will now be cars, not buses. Will still be in use for cars.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Could I just jump in on transportation accessibility? I know we're focusing quite heavily on the bus route and/or improvements, changes to existing bus services. The report is quite detailed and goes into some considerable length of assessing walking, cycling, public transport options, including the station, and obviously the reality that it acknowledges it's not a highly sustainable location. It's worth the committee being aware that as with recent applications that we've debated around this table, the application is on the edge of a major development location, and therefore it is reasonably expected there would be a degree of walking and cycling, but it won't be wholly reliant upon it being an edge of settlement location. And ultimately, car journeys, which would, as they do to most parts of the borough, form the majority mode of transport, they would generally be shorter than there would be if the site was, let's say, in a less sustainable or more isolated location. So again, it's just a bit of context that the site is not wholly reliant on one mode of transport, bus or otherwise, and that does not, the mitigation and the obligations in here do not necessarily stand alone to make this the only thing that makes it acceptable. So just a little bit of context I thought would be helpful.
Thanks you, Brian. If there's nobody else wanting to speak, committee members wanting to speak, we have got to come to a conclusion tonight. The recommendation in the agenda is for conditional approval. I've heard some members not happy with the application. Is there anybody that would like to recommend refusal, and have they got a seconder, please? And the reasons for the refusal.
I would like to propose a recommendation for refusal, but I need a little bit of alignment with everybody else, because I think it's difficult for us to refuse it on certain parts like traffic and or maybe we believe that there is a we understand the concerns about infrastructure and highways and school places, but it's difficult to refuse those on those grounds, as the technical advice from statutory consultants in all of these respects should say that the application is acceptable. So the only part that we can play with are more the judgmental part, which is, the CP11, the gap part. And I see it also the local wildlife site. Yeah, those are the key parts that we could play, that maybe we can play it towards in appeal. All the other parts, and we feel them a concern, but they're going to be difficult to swing in an appeal, because the advisors, the technical advisors are there. So those are the two things I can see we could play with it, and that's why I would like to propose on it. But unless, Wayne, you have something maybe on the...
I think the two other sites that were mentioned, Watmore and Trowse Lane, were both in the draft local plan. So I don't think we should draw too much to the fact that they were overturned by the inspector. The difference we've got here is, and the bit that I always struggle with, is we're chucking stuff into this hopper, but it's not coming out the other end. Look at the last 2 years. So we're almost leading ourselves down a false sense of security, and it then comes back to this harm question, because this will all come down to harm. You've said it several times, Andrew. You said it. So we've got to look at this in terms of, so the site wasn't chosen when we did our spatial strategy. It wasn't in there. It's now been brought forward. Of course, any developer worth their salt would be looking at opportunities across every council and their land bank and thinking, this is a great opportunity because WBC do not have a 5-year land supply, so we're going to go for it. We've got to work out whether it's the harm, and then how we demonstrate that harm in a point that protects us when we go to appeal. That's the biggest conversation we've got to have now.
Wayne, am I taking that as seconding Martijn?
Well,
or?
I don't know. I don't know what I'm seconding. We've got to.
Okay, so what you're suggesting is that you want a proposal,
maybe
build out proposal.
Can we have a little bit more of a discussion on it? If we want to go for refusal, yeah. You have, I see 2 points, but I don't know if if there are other points that people can bring. It's like, it's against CP11, it's the gap. I can see the local wildlife site. All the other parts about traffic, buses, is going to be difficult. Maybe, the residents we all feel like it doesn't feel natural, but if we have, backup from the from the experts, it's going to be difficult to refute those ones. So the only 2 points I can see we could potentially argue in an appeal are those 2 parts. But I'm just looking if
Thanks,
anybody else. So that's what my proposal is based on.
Could I appeal 10 years ago?
Yes.
Sorry, there is constant interruptions, and obviously officers and members are doing their best to try and continue this debate with considerable amount of information. So it'd be really appreciated if members of the public could stop interjecting and saying things about people as well, which would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so Martijn's suggesting there could be reasons for refusal. There are other people that spoke against it. Have they got any members that spoke against it come up with either agreeing with those 2 reasons or with something else? Just to continue the debates.
Sorry, Chair, can I just jump in? In terms of the topic areas that the committee have discussed, the most appropriate and probably robust way to arrive at a set of agreed reasons would be to focus on the topic areas and discount them as you work your way through the topics that are either presented in the report or that you feel are adequately addressed, and then that will narrow down your concerns rather than jumping to the desired outcome without a kind of any identified harm or reason or route to get there.
Thank you very much. I think what's being referred to there is on page 13 and 14 and 15 a bit, is what's been looked at sort of subject by subject by the officers, and looked at the issues there and whether or not they can be overcome, whether there's a balance and in which direction that goes. So we could go through each one, but I wonder, could I just give you a few minutes to go for you to look, members to look at those items on page 13 and 14, and if there is something there that you feel that you'd like to highlight, then we can take it from there.
Yeah, okay. But I think I'm not sure if 13 is the one the content was there, but I suppose there are a few key things that have arisen. That is the access to roads, and you know, I can hear the concerns, but I think it's going to be difficult for us to challenge in appeal, for example, the expert knowledge from highways. The housing density, I think, also is going to be difficult to challenge, the number of houses on this site. Yeah, I think the possibly, you know, the number, the access road, the access in principle are there. The only thing for me is a big concern is that one of the accesses needs to go through a local wildlife site, an ancient site that for me, I can't see that being replaced by a SANG is a like for like, even though the biodiversity calculator might show that it is like for like. I found that difficult to say, and the part of it has to do with the fact that this currently is a site that has low visibility. It has no accessibility, which is, in my case, you know, we have very few paths in the country where we can have that one, and that has allowed a certain wildlife to flourish. And I suppose if you start opening that one to public, that will maybe cause a different types of wildlife, but it won't be the same thing. It won't be a like for like. So I know there is mitigations in place, but for me, those mitigations are not sufficient, or if I have to put a balanced view on it, for me, those mitigations don't feel making the way of losing this site outweighed. So those are the two arguments that I could argue about. All the other aspects of the science, you know, I found it, you know, I don't have, you know, maybe the buses, for me, that is difficult to argue. I mean, I know there's challenges, it's suboptimal. The sustainability of the site is also, for me, difficult to argue at this stage, because we're not, you know, it is part of a development. So those arguments are difficult for me to challenge based on the views from the experts. But the other two parts, I think there are some judgmental parts in it that, you know, we could.
Chair, could I come?
Thank you, Martin.
Sorry, Chair, could I come in on that point?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I think you've got my report here in terms of the impacts on it, and I think probably a good way of considering this proposal overall is to consider the extent of each topic area we've gone through. So a lot of these topic areas have had very specific professional consultancy assessments in terms of highways, and using national kind of guidance data that we have to do. There is no harm basically subject to the mitigation. We've gone through it in terms of ecology, again, months and months and months going through very detailed biodiversity net gain analysis. And I know I take on board what you're saying in terms of maybe the type of biodiversity or the type of species, whatever, might be different from the next. But the advice from the professional in ecological terms is that there would be no biodiversity harm as such. So if we're thinking about issues in those respects, I would very much warn against forming reasons for refusal on those, because we've had technical expertise look at that and raise no issue. Yep. Natural England, our statutory consultee, has also looked at this as well and raised no problem. However, there might be other aspects. I mean, clearly this is a very on-balance report that I've provided. Clearly, we're also saying there is a degree of harm. So there are other more subjective issues in terms of the impact on the landscape and countryside that you might disagree with my assessment or also our landscape officer's assessment. There might be issues in terms of the sustainability of the site. I've highlighted this is not the most sustainable site, but then it's also not the worst. And we've seen in other appeals recently how inspectors have looked at this. So I think you've highlighted the issue of coalescence already, and whether you've got more concerns than that than I have in respect to the proposal in terms of the amount of harm that's likely to be created with that. Those may offer you more option to have a more detailed discussion on, maybe.
Thank you very much. Moses, you wanted to come in, and then Wayne.
Yeah, I think context is important here, because we keep referring to applications that have been refused and succeeded on appeal, but the quantum of the development may differ. So I'm looking at page 63, statement number 157. This is what the officers themselves say. The application site will not be ideally located with regard to access to existing facilities and services by sustainable modes of transport. So there will be limited encouragement towards a modal shift from the use of private cars from the site. So this seems to suggest to me that this development will encourage the use of more cars. So how can that be sustainability?
Thank you, Moses. I mean, everybody has an impact, don't they? Whatever it is. The point of this paragraph here, 157, is highlighting the site in its current form. And yes, as I've said, it's not the most sustainable location. It's also not the worst. However, moving on from that first paragraph and outlined throughout the report and in terms of the obligations as well, we are securing other measures to improve the sustainability of the site, either through a walking, cycling strategy or the contribution towards the bus contribution, Arborfield bus contribution. But this, as I said to Martin, this may be something that you might come to a different view on in terms of the extent of how sustainable this is. The facilities and connectivity plan on that page, on page 63, gives you an idea in terms of how far it is from core facilities. And it's not that bad. The routes there, the plan shows, 7 minutes in terms of.
Let him finish what he's saying, please.
Moses, the plan on page 63. I'll refer you back to that. Yeah. So that was provided by the developer. We've corroborated it with our own assessment using Google Maps, etc., other kind of walking apps, cycling apps, and broadly speaking, it's not the most unsustainable location. So I think you as members here need to come to a balance in terms of how important you feel that is as an issue on this application and balance that up in the tilted balance.
Thank you. Did you want to come back? I've got Wayne waiting.
Yeah, we are relying on the officers to guide us. If you keep saying it's not the most unsustainable, you are saying it's not sustainable. And when you say other sides, relatively, what is the level of development? 350, 100, 60? So if I'm looking at trying to compare sustainability, you will say previous ones that have succeeded is 80 homes. I would say, okay, fine, but 350 would be just a jump.
Doing those sort of comparisons is actually doesn't work, or is kind of dangerous. So, Wayne, do you want to come in?
Yeah, no, I mean, in fairness to Andrew, he has this report isn't saying this is the best site. He's already said that. You read it, and this will come down to our judgment. principle of development. We've discussed that this evening. It wasn't in our original spatial strategy. Urban design, permeability, we've discussed that this evening. The joining of settlements and the whole question around sustainability. Now, it might be sustainable on a Sunday afternoon if you want to go for a walk to the local shop, but, you know, we know that with other applications, and this one is no different, if somebody wants to go and do their weekly shop at Tesco's, they would either need a car or a very long bus journey. If somebody wants to go to Wokingham Station, that isn't, apart from if you're going to get on your bike, walking that route in the middle of winter won't be, it's not sustainable. So I think for me, we've got these three pockets. We've got the piece around development, we've got the piece around the urban design and the permeability, as we've discussed before, and we've got the piece around sustainability, and that is subjective. If you were moving here and you were quite prepared to move here and have a car, fine. But if you were moving here and you were going to rely on walking and cycling, you would probably make a different choice.
Thank you very much. Martin, did you want to come back? Oh,
Could I just respond to that? That's Wayne, appreciate that there you've kind of identified 3 points there. So you talk about the principle, you talk about permeability, you talk about sustainability. Now, the question again that members of the committee will be to ask is that at a planning appeal, when an inspector views the reasons for refusal and, for example, views principle of development reason, it's outside a settlement, it's contrary to our local plan, we've acknowledged that in the report. The MPPF paragraph 11, tilted balance is engaged, over delivery it's been tempered, but ultimately that test of it needs to significantly and demonstrably outweigh is there. So then he'll park that, he or she will park that, okay? Because he'll return to it at the end of their decision. Then they'll go on and look at permeability of the site, again referring back to not only recent appeal decisions, but what level of permeability is there or should there be for a site of 350 houses? Is it a single access? No. Is it 2 accesses? Yes, 2 vehicular ones. Does it have public connectivity? Can people walk through the site? Is it easy for people to get around? And the answer will either be yes or no. And then sustainability. Would someone working in London reasonably walk 21 minutes from this site to the station every day? It's not unreasonable. The strict definitions of sustainability, which have been discussed at length at appeal, public inquiry and at hearings recently for applications that have been refused at this committee, have determined that sustainability is not black and white. And in a borough with the highest car ownerships in the UK, to judge one site on, for example, an enhanced level of sustainability, which other residents of Woos Hill or Everden's or Barkham would not be subject to, I think would be a risky approach at a planning appeal. Okay, so sustainability, the question is it unsustainable? It's not the most sustainable, but it's certainly not the least sustainable. It's on the edge of the largest major development location we have in the borough. It's on main arterial routes or a short distance from. It has supermarkets within 10, 11 minutes. It has Molly Miller's employment area. It has schools within 9-minute walk, I think it was, from the edge of the site. That's not unreasonable for any occupant, bearing in mind that people aren't forced to live in houses.
Sorry, could you keep quiet, sir?
People aren't forced to live in houses. They decide to live based on their circumstances. And if, for example, a house is in the countryside, they possibly would consider moving there if they didn't own a private vehicle. Likewise, most of the borough is quite car orientated and we don't have central London or inner urban sustainability levels. So again, the development, the inspector will be viewing any refusal reason on sustainability through those prisms of what is accepted, what is conventional. There will be discretion. It's not black and white. And to say something is an 11-minute walk when actually 10 minutes is in the standards won't hold much water. Okay, so the point is the principle of development we have established in this report is contrary to local plan. It's contrary to CP11. It is development outside a settlement. It's not where we want to put houses. It's not where we've identified houses to go. But as Wayne said, yes, it's not even been taken through in the LPU, but a word of warning on the LPU and the site selection process. The recent appeal decisions weren't allowed because they were in that site selection process. The HELA, when it looked at this site, when it was promoted, it came out rather favourably compared to other sites that have been discounted. And the actual commentary is in the report. I haven't got it up in front of me, but it said it has a degree of connectivity relating to the settlement, exactly the things we're talking about here tonight. So again, I'd urge members to be careful in drawing in the local plan update and saying something's not in it, because there may have been better, more preferable sites on the table at the time. And if, for example, another site selection process is undertaken, how do we know what this site will come out in the wash as? So again, there's a number of points there that maybe need further debate before any wording for a refusal reason is agreed upon.
Thank you, Brian. That was very helpful. I think it was. It's outlining that none of us, want these sorts of developments, but we are in between a rock and a hard place, basically, with the way the inspectors look at the applications, the land supply, etc. I've still got on the table a proposal by Martijn. Have I?
Maybe I want to discuss this a little bit further, because this is an important part. I think sustainability, arguing against sustainability, is going to be very difficult in this case. Yeah, we might feel as a people that it is not sustainable, but experts, the technical experts, show us that not ideal, but it's not unsustainable. Yeah. But on the principle of development, there are some judgments, and I personally feel like this goes against our plan. And especially about the gap, having the two communities or the two settlements separation. And the second is on the permeability. Yeah, we do have two accesses, but one of the accesses we can only achieve by going through a local wildlife site. Yeah, if you're taking that one out, this one is not permeable enough. So I'm feeling is that. And it says here, the ecology says here, like, the decision maker will need to assess the proposal and whether the proposal could avoid harm to the local wildlife site. If so, whether the need for development outweighs harm to the site of. So we have some judgments there, I feel, to challenge. No, you want me to cover that part? Yeah, thank you.
Point, Martin. Thank you. Yeah, so CP7, I think you're referring to, and our ecologist raised that particular point. So yeah, he's advised that suitable mitigation can be put in place long term to mitigate, balance up harm to local wildlife site. We're not saying that it's clearly going to be impacted upon, but long term we can deliver the same. There wouldn't be no biodiversity net gain. However, CP7 still requires that we look at avoidance. So to look at avoidance, I've had to look at, well, what's the first thing we need to consider? Could that road be moved somewhere else? Well, it could be moved further to the west, maybe, next to the kind of closest house, but it would still be within the local wildlife site. So same effect there, basically. Could we do away with the road completely? No, we couldn't, because a development of that size would need another access. So that has to be provided in that sense. So then if we shift to, well, why do we need the development at all on that site? You've got to consider that in the light of our position in terms of 5-year supply, or lack of 5-year supply, 3.2 years. We would need this site plus several others to get back up to where we need to be in terms of 5-year supply. So on that basis, we've looked at the kind of need for it, balance that up, but also considering the fact that there is appropriate mitigation to redeliver replacement trees and the biodiversity. It meets the requirements of CP7. Now, it doesn't mean that you might not have an issue in terms of the landscape value, maybe, of the wildlife site, because that's clearly you put a road through the landscape wildlife area, there's going to be an impact in terms of visually, isn't there? So that may be something that you're thinking of. But technically, in terms of biodiversity, CP7, the specialists that have looked at it, our consultees, are advising that that's dealt with.
Martin, do you want to come back?
I'm just, for me, and this is the difficult part I'm having. We were replacing, for the permeability, for that to be acceptable, we need a second road. Yeah, for this type of development. So the development then has to go through this local wildlife site, which will significantly impact that site, and then as an alternative, as our mitigation, we have a SANG, which is, for me, maybe technically it might be mitigation, but for me personally, that doesn't feel a like for like, and that is the judgment I suppose I have to make. So I come to a different view on that. I see your point, but from a technical, technically say that this is the SANG is a acceptable alternative to this site, I'm struggling with, and then that goes to say then but you need that permeability, you need that second one to demonstrate the permeability. So because if that's not there, you won't have the permeability. So it's a bit chicken and egg for me to say that permeability.
Duncan can address that.
Could we bring Duncan if he's I think he's still online there. Duncan, I think hopefully you've been overhearing the conversation, and it's in a nutshell, obviously Martin's looking at this thinking, okay, the mitigation that we might get wouldn't be the same as the existing local wildlife site. And I've explained how I've navigated through CP7 in that respect. But it might be useful if you could give some more clarity in terms of the technical aspect, your professional aspect in terms of ecology and in terms of apples and pears, so to speak, or newts versus whatever it might be. Owls or buzzards, thank you.
Thank you. Local wildlife sites go through a survey process and a selection process that is run by Thames Valley, or coordinated, I should say, by Thames Valley Environmental Record Centre. And there is a guidance document that they publish as to how a site might qualify as a local wildlife site. This particular local wildlife site, it's my interpretation. I don't have the original qualification selection documentation because that was from prior to when TVEC started collecting the records. But my interpretation of the original designation is that it was principally on the habitats of principal importance, the lowland mixed deciduous woodland, the wet woodland that was present on site. So there's a direct harm in loss of that habitat, and then consequently a compensation measure of recreation of that particular habitat. And that particular habitat is proposed to be within a public open space, the SANG. There are certainly public open space sites that we manage that are local wildlife sites. The obvious one being Dinton Pastures. I admit that's a lot larger, but there are smaller ones, and some including quite urban sites such as Woos Hill Meadows was recently designated, and Cantley Park was fairly recently designated. Winnersh Meadows recently designated as local wildlife sites, and they all have public access. And actually, during their designation process or the selection process, one of the selection criteria that is considered a positive is whether or not there is public access for appreciation of the local of the site of the wildlife. So actually, the public access, I admit, may cause a disturbance. It's unlikely to cause a disturbance to the extent that the habitat of principal importance that's being created will be lost. And in terms of where it might go in the future, the local wildlife site selection panel do go through a review process. They try to look at each site. Every 10 years, there is a degree of variation in that, but periodically they do try to review each site. And they would likely look to assess any public open space and see whether that contains or buffers, extends the existing local wildlife site, and consider whether that also meets the local wildlife site selection criteria. And the function that it provides in providing public access would likely, to the selection panel, be considered a positive merit.
Thanks, Duncan, for that. Does that answer your or reassure the points you were raising? I have to defer to Duncan as the specialist.
Could I just add, I mean, we're talking about a SANG here, which actually does give, and I'm not talking either way for or against, but it does protect that area. It does give that area highest protection, as opposed to maybe the field down at the south end, which hasn't got that sort of protection. So that was one gain out of it. But I think we've still got issues on the wildlife and woodland and the ecology. But the landscape value keeps coming up as to the impact on the landscape of this application, which we're not looking at the houses, we're just looking at the access. So anybody else got anything to add following on what the council's ecologist has said, or any way that we can move this on? I've still got a sort of proposal from Martijn. Did you want to discuss that a bit further, Martijn, or seek a seconder?
Okay, so the only one, so far I'm looking at a refusal based on the principle of development of CP11, which I know that one, and I'm looking at a refusal because of permeability, that the only way we can achieve permeability is going through a local wildlife site. That, for me personally, and I maybe a challenge, it's not a like for like, and we would lose a unique site that comes at the expense. So that is that is what I'm looking at, but
Is there a second for that, or anybody want to flesh that out or add to it?
Chair, sorry, could I just jump on the point, Martin? The principal development, we understand, and we can work with that. That is a understandable and a logical reason for refusal. The permeability, I just want to check what you mean by permeability, because you were referencing coalescence earlier with landscape harm and the gap between settlements. That is different from permeability, and I would probably steer members of the committee towards an assessment and your own individual views of whether the site leads to unacceptable coalescence and landscape harm, because in that regard you are steering clear of any technical, ecological, biodiversity related local wildlife site assessments, which I think is high risk, whereas when you are talking, as Andrew has mentioned earlier, when you're talking about perceived harm to landscape and the consequences of, for example, the development of fields on the edge of this part of Wokingham in close proximity to another settlement, you're naturally hinting on coalescence, and that has come up in the vicinity in the past.
Okay, so I can take from that then that a possible recommendation for refusal, not wishing to put words into your mouth, Martijn, but it's based on the principle of development and the unacceptable coalescence and impact on the landscape. That if that's acceptable as a proposal, then I need to ask for a seconder.
That would be my proposal at this stage.
Right. Is there a seconder, please? Okay. As there's no seconder, then that proposal falls. That is the process that we have to follow. Is there anybody else that wants to recommend, I mean, as opposed to what's in the agenda, recommend refusal with different reasons? If not, I'd like to go to the recommendation that's in the agenda, please. No, I haven't got anything. Okay. So I'd like to put the recommendation from the chair. I'm sensing something. So my recommendation would be for conditional approval of this application. Regrettably, but we are faced with what we're faced. All those in favour? Oh, I need a seconder. Yes. Is there a seconder for that? So if there isn't, we're in no man's land. Good.
I don't think people around the table realise what you're asking them, Carol. Because if nobody's going to accept Martin's and nobody's going to accept Carol's, where do we go?
Can I suggest that we just take a moment? I'd like to take the advice of the officers as to what we can, because normally we know what we're doing. We have a refusal or we have an approval, and I take a vote and everything works well. So if you just bear with me for a moment, I'll just have that discussion and come back in to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. So at the moment we have, from what officers understand, is there is 2 identified reasons for refusal at the moment. We've got the principle of development and we've got the erosion of separation between settlements, the coalescence that members have articulated. There is a couple of other points that is worth kind of bringing to members' attention. There has been a lot of discussion over landscape impact, whether it is through the loss of the local wildlife site in terms of its visual harm, rather than any technical or ecological metric perspective. And obviously, I think, Wayne, you may have used the words or Moses urbanising, or someone around the table, and forgive me now, there has been a considerable amount of debate, but I believe one member did talk about an urbanising effect. It might have been Sam, yes, using urbanising large scale on the edge of a settlement. So there is, other than the principle of development and the erosion of settlements, there is a sort of character landscape impact reason there in the background, which hasn't quite made its way into any formalised reason for refusal. At the moment, that's what officers understand and are interpreting. We can't, unfortunately, do anything about the vote. We just need to assist you in arriving or debating or considering matters in the agenda. So at the moment, we do have 2.5 kind of reasons for refusal. I guess it is up to you whether you wish to continue to flush that out around the table. But again, as I say, we can't necessarily do much more than that, than answer your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, okay. I'm just wondering whether the other way forward is to come up for some reasons, having just recommended approval, but to come up with more reasons for refusal, which we've been given by the officer. So that's on a refusal on the basis of principle of development, the landscape impact, in other words, the visual harm on the landscape, and the increased urbanisation on the edge, I don't know if I've got the right words, but urbanisation on the edge of settlement. Those, as I understand it, are the reasons we've just been given that we could use for refusal. I'm not hearing.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, principle of development, impact on the countryside, the landscape character, and the erosion of separation between the settlements.
Okay, it's the erosion of, that I haven't got. Oh, that was the coalescence.
But
I would also like to hear, what the other members want to do. I mean, we can't. We voted in to make decisions. We have some responsibility. I think having no vote doesn't help none of us here. Yeah, so I like to hear the people's views on the way forward, and not just leave it to the chair and vice chair to address that one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, but then we need to specifically specify the minutes and make sure everybody can we ensure everybody gets everybody helps each other to make sure we're back on time. Yeah, because I don't want that one to repeat.
Well, was that Wayne? Was that a serious suggestion? Yes. Okay. Wayne seriously needs a break. Okay. I will, let's make sure everybody can hear this, adjourn the meeting for 3 minutes. Please, does that give you long enough? Right, thank you very much. Okay, when we had this adjournment, there seemed to be some problems in the reasons. Let's start off with the reasons for refusal. The officers have had a discussion, and I think they're going to come up with an idea that I will then take forward. So we could listen to them first, and then we'll go from there. But I do need members to either get themselves involved in the discussion or preferably get involved with a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. So from what Martin has kind of outlined in his motion to refuse, it sounds like we've got three topic areas from what we're hearing as officers. First one sounds fairly straightforward, the principle of development. So got a standard one here that we use. So the proposal represents inappropriate, unplanned development outside of development limits within the countryside that is contrary to the spatial objectives of the development plan and to the various policies. Secondly, impact on landscape and countryside. So the proposed development would have a detrimental impact on landscape and character, an appearance of the area by reason of a loss of a sizable section of open and attractive undulating landscape in the countryside, attractive landscape in the countryside, removing undulating. And then you might want to put in what Martin was saying, landscape wildlife site as well, local wildlife site, sorry, because the character of that. With an urbanizing large-scale development, contrary to policies X, Y, and Z. And then thirdly, I think you've been talking about erosion of separation between settlements, Martin. So the proposed development would significantly and prominently erode the last remaining open space that separates Wokingham and Barkham, resulting in a detrimental degree of visual and perceived coalescence between these independent settlements. So those would be, that's what I'm hearing from what Martin is suggesting. If members are minded to kind of go with that motion, we would request that the final wording of that is delegated to officers to kind of finalise. And also we'd need to look at reasons for refusal in terms of section 106 as well, because you've got a significant package of measures that is required to facilitate the development. So that would also need consideration. So Martin, I don't know if that hits the areas that you were thinking of.
Yep, that hits what I'm thinking of. But I still need a seconder.
Could I just add there that in terms of the debate and the kind of primacy of those reasons, I'd probably advise having the obviously first reason being principle, but the second reason being the coalescence, the loss of the gap between settlements, and then impact on landscape character as the third. Not that it makes a significant amount of difference. And another observation for members is that, yes, the development would significantly erode a gap, given its size. It's up to you whether you want to include the word something like prominently or not, bearing in mind other sites nearby have a greater degree of prominence, as we've talked about with the Limmerhill Road applications, given the typology of the land, given where it can be seen from. This does not necessarily share all of those characteristics. So again, I just kind of something to bear in mind, that it is a significant site. It results in the loss of a large area of land to development, but whether that is prominent, all these kind of nuances are important when the council comes to possibly, if it is refused, to defend an appeal based on the assessment and analysis that's happened here tonight.
Thank you. First of all, does everybody understand those 3 points that have been raised by the officer as possible reasons for refusal? Or are there any questions, or do you want to debate any of them? Wayne?
Me too, Andrew. Did you remove openness?
Sorry, Wayne, I wouldn't use the term openness because openness is quite a specific term that relates to Greenbelt. So no, I didn't use openness.
because it is quite that word at the top, prominence. I wouldn't say I don't think you should use that. No, because it's not prominent. It's very secluded on that main Barkham Road.
Thank you.
And that's the important distinction that members need to make in order to assist officers when it does come to appeal.
Thanks, Wayne. And
What were you referring to with the 106? Can you just explain?
Yes. So in addition to those reasons for refusal, we'd be looking at, in absence of a planning obligation, to secure suitable avoidance measures, mitigation measures for the SPA, affordable housing, obviously, highways contributions, employment skills plan, open space allotments. Right. Those would all need separate reasons for refusal. Just off the cuff, we'd need to work those up in detail.
Okay.
Thank you. Has any other member of the committee got any questions on those three reasons? Yes, Moses.
Yeah. Okay. Apart from the loss of separation, you seem to have suggested that other things could be mitigated. So what has changed?
Officers have been very clear in 110 pages of the agenda of what can and cannot be mitigated and what is put into the planning balance. Not every single part of this development will not have an impact. Comprehensive mitigation has been proposed. Other matters that have been discussed here tonight, whether it be ecology, whether it be transport matters, have been kind of at length discussed. That's not what members are saying to us in terms of refusal reasons.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, any other questions? If not, what I'd like to do is seek a seconder for the proposal from Martijn for refusal based on those three reasons that the officers have worked up. I think subject to it being written in officer speak, being delegated to the officers to do that. Am I right in saying I feel I've got... Yeah, okay. I did ask Martijn, could you verbally make that proposal? I'm sorry.
Okay, I would like then to make a proposal to refuse this application based on the principle of development, on the erosion of the separation between the settlements between Barkham and finally on the impact on the landscape and the countryside. And then finally, from so the issues on the S106.
Thank you. Was that going to be your comment? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we've got a proposal. Is there a seconder, please? Well, thank you, Greg. That means that we could go to the vote, I think. Yes, okay. Can't believe this. Right, we have a proposal for refusal based on the three. I won't give all the reasons again, they're very clear, but they will be, the wording of those will be delegated to the officers to make sure that they are as carefully worded as possible. Seconded by Greg Bellow. Could I have all those in favour of the refusal, please? And anybody against? And any abstentions? Just one abstention. Thank you very much indeed for your patience, and thank you. I was going to say for your good behaviour, guys. You did do well. I know how difficult it is, so thank you very much.